de nuevo. Hola, soy Luis Quid. Bienvenidos a otro episodio de HP, el podcast en el que hablamos de salud mental y en industrias creativas y profesiones creativas. El día de hoy contamos con el hermosísimo Alex y con nuestro invitado especial Tyler Boyce, que viene a platicarnos un poquito de su experiencia con respecto a el game development y narrative design. La mayoría de este podcast va a ser en inglés, entonces si tienen alguna duda o pregunta, lo pueden poner en el chat y lo atendemos lo más rápido que podamos. ¿Va? Ok, entonces vamos a hacer el cambio ahora. Muchas gracias. Hi Tyler, how are you doing?
Doing good. Y gracias por hablar en inglés. My Spanish is just so rusty.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get back into the swing of things, but my roommate doesn't speak it, and I'm like, I don't really have anyone else to talk to here. So,
Hey man, if you wanna, we're up to like a couple times a week to get together in Discord and like speak Spanish for you.
oh, I would love that. Legitimately, I would love that. I will
Yeah.
take you up on that.
Yeah, totally, no problem, man. We love to like speak to people. Anyways, thank you so much for agreeing to talk in this podcast about your experience inside game development and narrative design. I think it's like a subject that's really interesting and that carries a lot of inner struggles when trying to get into the game development industry. So I really want to thank you and like tell you that I really appreciate you like being here.
No, yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on here, especially because like when I first started getting interested in the games industry, like looking at it like seriously as a profession, the number one question that I kept asking was, so when you were first at the start of your career, like I never got enough time to like talk with people who are like at the start of their video game dev profession. Like it was always just I've been in the games industry for 5 years, for 10 years. It was never people where I am right now. So getting to talk about my experience literally right out the gate, just a year or so into this. Uh, I mean, hopefully your listeners will appreciate it. I don't know.
I'm sure we all will. Don't worry about that. Like one of the things that we love that we always appreciate from the people that come here is that they share similar struggles to the background they come from. They always share similar like issues they go through in different like scales. But in the end, we're all going through similar stuff, and that's what we really appreciate. So don't worry about it. You will do just fine. We're really glad you're here.
Thank you.
Anyways, to start with like the whole dynamic of the podcast, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background, where you're at right now?
Sure. My name is Tyler Boyce. I am currently a master's student at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and as you previously mentioned, game developer with an emphasis on narrative design. And not sure how far back I need to go into my background exactly, but basically, my undergraduate degree is actually in political science. I graduated 6 years ago in 2015, and basically spent a couple of years doing a bunch of odd jobs because let's just say that in June of 2015, something happened that made me kind of lose my taste for politics, and I ended up switching professions quite a bit after that. So yeah, I kind of got disillusioned with politics, and oddly enough, I started looking at entertainment. I moved to LA in 2016 and did a bunch of different odd jobs in the entertainment industry, working for Warner Brothers, Cartoon Network, in different capacities, everything from file clerk to studio operations, like basically anything that got me in the door. But I never really rose to the ranks. It was just kind of getting sucked into the gig economy and just kind of going from one job to the next, to the next, to the next, working as long as until they let you go.
Yeah.
And so I basically just kind of took like a gap year, so to speak. Like I was still working, but it was more so like it was less on the focus of the job I was doing at the time and more trying to think about, okay, but what do I want to do for a career? I'm just doing like different jobs. There's not really a career focus here. And I'd always been fascinated about video games. It's like my number one hobby. Like if I wasn't working on them, I'd be playing them. But it always seemed like a bit unrealistic. Like, you can't make a career in video games. Like, no one will pay you to make video games, right? And then I actually got a chance in 2019 to speak with a couple of different game designers. There was one in particular who, coincidentally, his name was also Alex, different individual, but basically it was for WonderCon. They do this event called Gaming Creator Connection, which is basically a networking event for game developers or aspiring game developers like I was at the time. And sat down with him, and we spent like a good hour just talking about, the kind of games I like, that I'd like to make. What about game design appeals to me? Like, what kind of professions line up with like that vision for game design? As well as like different tips and tricks about like exercises I could do to like kind of hone my skills and like kind of build up a portfolio. And so like that kind of got the ball rolling, and I decided that ultimately I'd go into a master's program to try and work on my portfolio, because I don't know the first thing about programming. I am very comfortable now that I'm actually getting started saying that programming sucks. You really have to love it in order to be just like a straight up game programmer. And I know this because my roommate is a game programmer, so I can say that. And yeah, so like I realized that I was going to need some help with the more technical side of things, like coding and kind of getting used to the industry jargon. So I applied to a bunch of different grad schools. Oddly enough, got accepted to quite a few, but I kind of settled on UC Santa Cruz just because I got a chance to like actually visit the campus in February of last year. Oddly enough, just as the coronavirus was hitting the Bay Area, but not enough that it was like mass spread quite yet, so they were still open. And I actually got a chance to like meet with like last year's crop what's the term I'm looking for, cohort, just like basically the people who are going to be graduating later that year. And I don't know, it just really clicked. Like it was like it was like meeting a bunch of random strangers, and you're instantly friends with them. Like you're just like seeing the stuff they're working on and hearing about their interests, and you just kind of instantly connect with all of that. And so it was just like, out of all the grad schools I was considering, I just looked at UCSC and I'm like, these people, that I want to work with them, I want to study with them. And then of course the pandemic hit, we were all in lockdown. But I decided to just continue on with my education anyways, because I'm like, I can either get started now or I can get started later, but either way it's going to take the same amount of time. So so for the past how many months has it been? 5 months? I have been studying with the program, making my own games, several games in fact, but they're very, very small indie scale things. Like probably nothing you would have heard about, but if you do a deep dive of itch.io, I'm sure you'll find one or two games that I've made.
That sounds great, to be honest. It's the first step you need to take.
No, yeah, and that's like the big thing that they keep stressing, my professors keep stressing, is just start making something. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to look like, professional, like AAA polish.
Yeah.
Just as long as it's something you can put your stamp on and said, I came up with this mechanic, or I had the idea for this character design, or whatever it may be. Just there's something about it that is uniquely you, that you've worked on. And that's kind of where I'm at this point. I'm very, very early on into the process. Like to frame it, I have just started learning Unity. They have only just trusted us to put our hands on C# and Unity, and that's been fun.
Well, I mean, I'm really glad to be here in this experience because, like, there's a lot of people that I've known that want to get into the game development that are like, well, I'm really scared to get into it because what if I'm not good enough for it? What if it's not what I'm looking for, you know? And like hearing you say that, you know what? I'm just gonna start doing games. I'm just gonna start creating. I'm just gonna do my thing and see where it goes from there. I think it's really valuable, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's like the number one thing I learned, like pretty much the first month that I started making games is like I was so terrified that, you know, I'm gonna screw something up, I'm gonna fail, I'm gonna get like an F on something, like it basically like those kind of recurring negative thoughts. And I will forever love my very first programming professor for this. And he's like basically said, "You're afraid you're gonna fail? Good, you're gonna fail." And like it really threw me for a loop. But like the point he was trying to get across is like, yeah, you're not gonna get it right the first time. That's the whole reason you're in grad school, guys. Is you're not gonna be great programmers right out of the gate. We don't expect you to. Please ask us questions. Please say that you don't know what you're doing. That way we can help you know what you're doing in like a month or two. And it was just such a refreshing take on it because like all the other jobs I'd had in my life, it's all like, okay, so you're starting the job today. The next 15 seconds of this conversation will constitute your training, so good luck. And like there's like basically just like no prep and no time invested in like really training and making sure that the employees like understand what they're doing. It's basically just, we got to get you on the clock, we got to get you rolling because there's work that needs to be done. And at least with like my experience with these classes and with the teams that I've worked with, that's not really the case. It's very open, it's very honest, and it's a heavily collaborative environment. Like we definitely like rely on each other, like like not just like academically, but also socially through all of this, like just kind of checking in, like, hey, how's your day going? Like any issues that I can help with, like yeah. So I do like that about it.
Yeah, that is really cool to hear you say that. There's actually one person on chat saying like really like boys. He's like absolutely right about what he's saying. That it can be really scary sometimes, but it's so nice to like actually have people like help you through it and tell you that you're not gonna be able to like get it out of the box. You know, like you're gonna fail and that's okay.
Yeah, and that's been my experience with job interviews too, is they really like it when you just admit up front, like one job interview I did recently, they were asking me, so what's your experience programming in Unity? Can you like, just for sake of example, I can't really get into too many of the details because of NDAs, but can you basically move this object over to this side of the screen without the player being able to see the object moving? And I just explained honestly, I've just started learning Unity and C#. I'm not quite comfortable doing that level of coding, but I am learning still, and it just very honest about like my experience or lack thereof. And like I was kind of surprised by the reaction. They're like, "Oh, thank God! You have no idea how many people have tried to BS their way through that question." And it's just, yeah, it's fine if you don't know the answer. Yeah, please let us know that you don't know the answer. We will work with you to get you up to speed on that. And it's so refreshing. It's just like to have someone who actually wants to train you and help you get better at this thing. Because if you get better at it, you make them more money. So
yeah, exactly. You're practically an investment.
Exactly.
Harlan's Weapons on chat says, I'm a programmer and most of my work is just trying to find fixes for bugs. It's definitely okay to fail. Most things take a while to work that way you are expecting. The important thing is to keep trying. So yes, absolutely.
I have so many fun stories about programming for the first time and discovering the wonderful world of debugging.
Absolutely.
Because, like when they started out with programming, they started us out with Python. Like we hadn't even started touching the C language. It was just because Python's relatively easy and quite frankly fun to learn.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a thing with the particular compiler that we were using to practice Python, it only like singled out bugs that you had made one at a time. So you can spend like a decent like 15 to 20 minutes fixing one bug and thinking, okay, that's done. And then you try running it again, another bug has popped up. Why didn't you let me know that 15, 20 minutes ago? Okay, fine. It's just, yeah, it can be a bit of a laborious process, but yeah, it's been fun to kind of like learn through that.
Yeah. um, in your experience, like in all the projects that you've been working on, has there ever been a time where you felt burnout, or that you know that you've been burnout when with the things that you've been working on?
Yeah. Yeah, this week, in fact. I don't want to get into too many details about this, but like basically, long story short, I had fallen behind on a couple of the assignments, and I was like right up against the deadline, and it was like basically midnight deadline. Got to crunch, got to get them all done. Um, and like ultimately, yeah, it like it's tough for me because like I deal with like ADHD and depression, and so as well as like the whole like overarching feelings of like isolation because of self quarantine and that sort of thing. Uh, yeah, so it's important to stay on top of the work. Like those deadlines aren't going to go away just because you've got personal stuff to deal with. But it's important to understand that because of those factors, it's going to take a little bit longer than normal to reach some of those deadlines. And that's not to say that you should be a workaholic and like work twice as hard. Like you still need breaks in order to like rest and recuperate. And like this is why I'm so thankful for therapy and my therapist. Is that one of the tricks I learned is to schedule the rewards just as much as the work. Like not just like you know build this level of the dungeon crawler. You have 4 hours to get it done, but also to schedule like, okay, at the end of that 4 hours though, I'll make myself a healthy snack, or I'll go exercise, or like maybe I'll play a video game for just an hour. Because like that's one of.
Sorry to interrupt you. That's a way
No.
that you handle out the burnout, right? Like having a snack or playing a video game after you, or how do you find a way to deal with the burnout?
Yeah, because that's one of the big things about feelings of burnout and anxiety is that if the only thing on your calendar is work and stuff that you're not necessarily thrilled about but it needs to get done, that's the overwhelming pressure of this needs to get done, then that's all you're feeling like throughout the day. And it's important to like kind of remind yourself you've got things to look forward to as well. Like they may also be work. Like exercise is something that is physically taxing. Cooking is something that is can be a bit time consuming.
Yeah,
but if there's something you enjoy, make sure to highlight that and put it on the schedule. It feels weird to say like physically write it out on the schedule, but for me at least that has made a difference.
Yeah, sometimes it helps to others. So, boys, what happens when you are already on a burnout in the project that you're working
on? I mean, in the past, a lot of times I've just tried to power through it and just kind of be like, okay, so it's due before midnight. Just work straight on through for 5 hours and just get it done. Like it just needs to get done. Get through it. And I guess that can work in some cases for some people, but you really have to like be in a really good mindset and like really have some other like kind of I want to say calming factors, like you're listening to music you like, or you're taking frequent breaks to like play a game or whatever it may be. Like nobody ever like works straight through for 5 hours, or at least no one I know who has a healthy like work-life balance has done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like nowadays I'm more inclined to like kind of break up my schedule a bit further. Like I'll have a decent chunk of the morning where I'm working on assignments and working on games, and then I'll take like a decent like mid noon, like late morning, early afternoon break, and then I'll get back to work in like mid afternoon, and then of course I've got classes throughout all that. But it's it helps me to like kind of plan my day so that I'm not just working at any one stretch of time, or I'm not just relaxing in any one stretch of time. Like it's what works for me, but ultimately it's just kind of finding the routine that you're most comfortable with, that kind of you feel less stress, but you also feel productive. It's a balance, and you kind of need to find the equilibrium that works well for you.
Yeah.
Thank
We have a comment in chat. It's actually from Harmless Weapons again. She says, I totally agree. I noticed my mental health got better when I started scheduling break times and to take even a 5-minute break after a few hours of work. So I think, like, as you said, break times are really, really important. And I'm really glad that you're taking them because it really helps out.
No, yes. After this week especially, like it like occasionally, like even like when you're like doing these routines and like you've been doing it for weeks and weeks and weeks, even then you can like kind of slip up and like forget the routines and schedules you set up for yourself, and you kind of need to remind yourself like, no, don't push yourself too hard. Like,
Yeah.
let's just take a moment, do this instead, and then we can come back to it. Because like ultimately,
No, so sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say, ultimately, if I miss a deadline, that's worth it if it's for the sake of my own physical or mental health. Because like my academics are important, my career is important, but none of that is going to make any difference if I'm doing it at like detriment to my body or my mind, because those are the things that are going to be typing away at the keyboard, thinking up new ideas. And if I'm not taking care of myself, then none of the other stuff matters. So that always kind of has to come first, as much as it like pains me to say, as much as like I'm kind of trying to stay dedicated and focused and like I'm gonna be a game designer and throwing all my effort into it. It's like you can't really throw all your effort into anything. You've got to save a little bit for yourself at least.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope that makes sense.
No, yeah, it absolutely makes sense. And even more now that like we're stuck inside and there's a lot of things happening like around the world. Like our routine is deeply related with the stability, I think, of our mental health sometimes. Because like if we're not having like a healthy routine, when working on our assignments, working on our like projects, and even working with ourselves, it can be really like messy sometimes. And like taking breaks and having like scheduled throughout the day, you know what, I'm gonna start with this, then I'm gonna go with this, and then I'm gonna take a break, and then I'm gonna keep going. That is actually really, really important, I think.
And yeah, I agree. And I've been kind of living that life, and just it's worked well for me so far.
Now, you're starting right now as a game designer. You're like following the steps of other people that are your teachers, your colleagues. How's it going with you when like let me rephrase that, when trying to see how good you are at the moment, or how good you feel about your like skills at the moment? Does it ever come a time wherever you feel or you compare with others that are better than you?
Yes, imposter syndrome, my old friend. Yeah, so again, it kind of gets back into this greater theme of like nobody started out perfect. Nobody was like really like coming right out the gates, like as a coding whiz, or just like a person with like phenomenal art or dialogue or whatever it may be. But that said, everyone in this industry has experienced imposter syndrome at some point. Everyone. And you are kidding yourself if you think, oh, I have imposter syndrome, but I'm the only one. I'm the only one who doesn't match up to my betters. I'm the only one who's a failure compared to all these titans of industry. It's like, no, those titans of industry just felt that imposter syndrome 5 years before you. That's the only difference. And that's taken a long, long time for me to realize, but I know it is, those feelings are like so strong in the moment because you're like, you really want to do good, and that's kind of where it comes from. It's like it's almost like a I want to say a defense mechanism, like a motivational defense mechanism. Is like, oh, I need to catch up with this person. All right, I got to do better. But it's when it comes at the expense of like your own self-esteem and your own valuation of yourself, and that's really what makes it toxic.
And talking about this, like the imposter syndrome, how do you remind yourself that you're doing a good job, that you're not as bad as you think?
Well, it's definitely, first of all, it's definitely helped to hear that from other people, that it's okay that I'm not doing as great a job right now, or even like whenever my professor says, this actually isn't that bad. You're saying you did a bad job, but you got like an A+ on this assignment. And I've been blown away in moments like those, because it's like, what? How? I'm sure I missed like 3 of the objectives on that assignment, but okay. But I don't know. To answer your question, it's you really kind of gotta take a step back and think about those people who you keep comparing yourself to, where they must have been like 5 or 10 years ago. And it's easy to like look at where people are now and automatically picture them in the exact same position a decade ago, which is it also helps to just say it out loud, is like, because then you realize how ridiculous that sounds. Like, I am definitely not the same person I was 10 years ago, and very few people are. I mean, I'm sure there are a few people out there who have like not emotionally or financially changed at all in 10 years, but oh well. But the for the most part, like 95% of us, we learn, we adapt, we get better, and ultimately, yeah, I just kind of have to keep thinking about time and thinking about like, I'm maybe struggling with something now. That doesn't necessarily mean I have to continue struggling with that 5 years from now, or even just a year from now. Like, I can work on that. I can get better, and it's gonna be a gradual process. But it doesn't have to be an uphill climb. I can look at it as improving myself, as opposed to trying to catch up to someone, and I may only be perceiving the level that they're at. For all I know, they're at the same level I am, but I just think I'm at a disadvantage because of the name of the studio they work at, or the name of their job title.
Yeah, it's like they say, like progress isn't like straightforward. You have ups and downs. So.
Exactly, and nothing taught me that better than living in LA. Like, that whole like feast and famine, peak and valley cycle of different jobs, and honestly, the game industry is not that different either. It very much is. You're brought on for the life of a project, and when that project ends, time to find a new job, time to find a new studio. But
yeah,
I think the main difference is that with video game development, and there might be other jobs in the industries where this is true as well, but I know for sure this is true for game devs. Even if you like end a project and you have to move on to a different studio and a different game, you can take what you've learned from that past game and transfer it over to your new position. And I love to equate this to the save file transfer in Mass Effect, because it's pretty much like that same process of like, you're taking your previous experience and credits and everything you earned in the game, and a little bit of it gets transferred over to the new game. It's a completely different game, but there's something from the previous title that gets moved over to it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just kind of that knowledge that like you're continuing to grow and adapt and build your career, even if it's not necessarily static at a single company or a single franchise.
Yeah. Just a quick pause. We have a comment in chat. They said that I don't really know boys, but I really like him right now. He's saying just what I need to hear at the moment. So thank you for that. We really appreciate it.
No, yeah, and I absolutely do not blame anyone for not having heard of me yet. I understand that anonymity is one of the great things about this industry. It's just like, oh, I love that game. I don't know who worked on it, but it's great.
No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It happens.
For example, now taking like this, for example, what you said about taking your experience from previous games to new games or new projects, there's a lot of bad conducts. You're not just taking sometimes the good, you're taking the bad, right? And there's a lot of bad workplace conducts, if you could say that. Like, for example, there's a lot of misconceptions on what game developers should do, on what game developers or good game developers should and would do. For example, working late or crunching. Sometimes there's a lot of people that have this belief that, you know what, there's not a good game if they're not crunching, if they're not working late, if they're not like putting your game before anything else. What do you think about that?
That is a very good question. It's interesting because like I have done overtime in the past for other jobs that is kind of equivalent to crunch. Like it's the same hours, but it's not necessarily the same type of work. Yeah. Although it was kind of well, I'd say it depends because with crunch there's this like misconception or possible like accurate conception depending on the studio. But I think that's kind of the point I'm trying to get at, is that each studio has their own unique approach to crunch. In some cases, it's completely voluntary. You can stay and work on crunch, or otherwise, it's just, go home and we'll see you tomorrow. The work will still be there. You'll just have to do it in fewer amount of hours. In some cases, studios don't allow crunch at all. Like they will just like flat out like refuse to allow employees to remain past working hours, or else they'll like set like a definitive cap at the amount of overtime that you can do. Where it's kind of like, okay, you can only do 10 hours overtime this week. You're done. Go home. Goodbye. And then there are the kind of bad actors you mentioned, where it's like where they use more coercive methods to try and keep employees working overtime on games. Either like with a more like benevolent or like, hey, we're all on the same team, we really got to get this shipped, let's do our part, let's get this done. And then of course like the ones who are straight up like, if you're not willing to commit to crunch, I'm not sure if we'll be able to retain you for the sequel that we're going to be working on. And it's like it's two different approaches, but it's very much the same. And this isn't really coming from any direct experience, although I have colleagues who are out there in the gaming industry right now who admit like, yeah, that's a thing with like this studio or that studio. I do hope it gets better, and that like if people do work overtime, if they do work crunch in the game industry, that it is voluntary, and that it is like overtime pay that at least pay and a half, if not double pay. Because like that was like some of the hardest thing reading about with like with Naughty Dog and The Last of Us is like, oh yeah, they worked over 100 hours a week, and they worked for the exact same amount of hourly pay that they get during normal working hours. Like, you gotta be kidding me. If you're working 100 hours, you should be getting at least double pay. And it's like, I don't know. When I read about stuff like that, it's hard for me to judge from the outside, because it's kind of like, I'm very much on the indie scene, if that. I'm still like learning the ropes. I'm still like working on making my own games, and I don't really know what the circumstances are of a AAA studio from firsthand experience. That being said, if I am on the inside and I'm seeing that workplace, that kind of abuse of employees taking place, I'm probably not going to stay quiet about it. I probably would reach out to HR and say like, hey, my boss is trying to force me to work overtime. I don't think that they're legally obligated to do that. Just as much as I would if I was seeing any instances of sexual harassment or racism or whatever like awful practices going on. And I make sure to make a point of that in every job interview I do, every resume I send off is like, hey, these are my values, is that I want my fellow employees to be treated fairly. I want them to be diverse and inclusive teams. I want to like have different perspectives to work with and to be represented in the games I make. And because I feel that's important, is that no matter where you're working, make sure that your employers understand what your core values are.
Yeah.
I don't know if that necessarily answers your question about bad workplaces, but like, that's just for me at least. I haven't really had any direct experience with that, but the best that I can think of is if I did experience it, to talk with someone, to whether it's a coworker or HR or my professor or whoever it may be, just like because it doesn't really help if I keep it to myself, and conversation can kind of like piggyback that idea off and be like, hey, is this a bad thing? And someone can confirm, oh yeah, that's definitely a bad thing, we should fix that. And ultimately I feel like that's where a lot of these bad actors in the workplace get away with it, is it kind of like everyone kind of keeps it to themselves with the expectation of like, well, I guess if everyone's going through this, because everyone might not be going through this. So some people might be working longer hours for less pay than you might be, and you're not going to know that unless you converse.
Yeah. Thank you. So I stalk you a little bit on Twitter and your social media, and I know that you're also a writer. So
yeah,
have you think about talking or integrating something about mental health in your stories or your storytelling?
Yeah, and I mean, in my writing, a lot of the writing that I've done thus far, just to do a quick shameless plug, has been for this website called Geek Girl Authority, which I've been so fortunate to have been writing for the past, like, has it been almost 2 years? Yeah, geez, almost 2 years now that I've been a contributor for their site. So it's just it's been really great, especially because like they're like a like mostly female and gender fluid writing staff, so writing about a lot of geeky topics like film, TV, video games from like mostly feminine perspective, which I love. And I can't recall if like me personally I've written about any mental health subjects, but it's definitely something that I would love to include in my video games, just because that comes quite into play a lot for characters, I find, like especially in like the really like best-selling AAA games, like like just off the top of my head, like if you look at Horizon Zero Dawn and Aloy, she is such a good example of both aspects of positive mental health and negative mental health, because like if you look at like her story, and I don't want to give away too many spoilers necessarily, but just the different aspects of her characterization, like the way she's defined by her relationship with her mother, even though she was raised mostly by a father figure, by Rost. The way that she refuses to be worshipped and idolized, and she has a very like goal oriented. No, we got to fix this thing. We're gonna go do it now. And like this feeling of like being isolated and not really belonging anywhere, but nevertheless feeling a responsibility to help others and to seek out help. There's different like variations on that theme, like not just throughout that game, but through a lot of games and a lot of like protagonists.
Yeah.
And as far as like yeah, like I'd love to be able to like kind of explore those topics like mostly through that way, like through the through characterization. I do like games where it's explored conceptually though, like Sea of Solitude is a really great example, like dealing with like combative parents and abuse, and it can get a little dark though, like and not that that's necessarily a bad thing, because I do love that these themes are being explored and kind of like physically represented for us to be able to play through and see. I would like to see a little bit more of the good though, like I'd like to see like more examples of like positivity, and especially like healthy positivity as opposed to toxic positivity. Feelings of community, feelings of self-worth, and it'd be nice to make a game about, like that once in a while. Not terribly realistic, because like inevitably like games are fundamentally about conflict. It's about like having an obstacle to your goal and being able to overcome obstacles, so you have to have those obstacles present. At least that's my perspective on narrative. But yeah, that being said, I'd like if there was just like at least one game I made that was all just sunshine and bunnies. That would be very nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Like speaking right now, like just to give a little bit of closure to the episode, I have two more questions. The first one goes with what you just said, and the second one goes with some advice to anyone who would be interested into becoming a game designer. The first one is, what's the best experience you've had with game development? Like, it can be either with games or with interactions with other people while making games.
Okay. It's tricky to think of just one. I suppose
I'm honestly glad that it's tricky to think of just one.
I kind of already mentioned one with Alex, the game dev at WonderCon 2019. So I'll go ahead and pick another one. There's this one office hours I did with one of my professors, Professor Melser, and especially because he deals in like alternative controls. Like we're used to like the typical controller scheme of like joysticks, like buttons,
accessibility and stuff.
Exactly. And so like coming up with like different conductivity and motion controls, and he works on a lot of really cool stuff. And so I had this one office hours with him, and I forget what the assignment was specifically that we were talking about, but basically the conversation eventually went into like me apologizing, saying, I'm sorry that I seem unable to get this. I'm sorry that I can't figure this out. And basically he was like saying, no, don't apologize. Like you can get this. I know that like it seems difficult now, and you know what? Even if you can't get it, here, I'll help you find a workaround. And we basically like worked through the problem for like the rest of the hour, just like coding together and like working off of the same compiler and subtext page. Or not subtext, Sublime is the one. Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's just like such a cool moment that I'm like, it's this professor like who I assume knows everything. Like he's the master coder because I'm the one learning programming from him, and here we are just working off of the same programming list, and he's making mistakes, he's creating bugs, and it's in one or two cases I picked up on those bugs, like, oh, that's not going to be able to run. And he's like, oh yeah, you're right. And then going back through and editing that, and it was just a cool moment, because it's kind of like realizing, oh, this guy's not too different from me. Like, yeah, it's just like being able to kind of see the similarities, despite the differences in like experience and skill sets. So yeah, that was a really nice moment, and I'm just lucky that that hasn't been the only moment. I'm grateful that I've had multiple moments like that through my career thus far.
That's amazing. I really like it. Really touched me, that moment, because I went to something similar when I was like also at college and at university, and it's really nice to know that there's people who also make mistakes.
Yeah, but it's especially just like being able to work off the same program at the same time, like especially since we're all isolated and unable to like physically hang out together, the fact that it's our code together that we were able to work on that at the same time is just thank God for the internet. Thank God for video games.
I know, right? And the last question before we go to see if anyone in chat has questions. What advice would you give anyone that's trying to start in game development or tries to start as a game designer?
Okay. It can kind of go one of two ways depending on whether or not you want to do what I did and go into academics and get a degree to learn all this stuff. This is gonna sound so weird if like I am hoping that my university is not watching this, but you can learn this without needing a master's degree. I am sorry for not doing a shameless plug of my own university. But it depends on how best you learn and like what you're trying to learn, because I'm in this program because I want to kind of get my feet wet in like all the aspects of video game design. I'm geared towards narrative design, which there's maybe like one class in the entire program that teaches narrative design. The rest is focused on game dev basics, like programming or game mechanics or whatever it may be. But I really wanted to expand my knowledge beyond just narrative design, just like beyond writing and plot development, and into like all the other areas of game design that I'm never really going to have to work alongside. Like no one on a game dev team is an island, so it made sense for me to be like, okay, what kind of work does go into making game art or programming, or and basically like learning all the other aspects of the process besides my own. I felt that was most valuable to me. But that said, if you're looking at just being a game programmer, then get yourself a copy of Unity and start practicing coding in C#. There are a couple of great tutorials on YouTube that you can watch along with. They can get a little frustrating to follow because they assume like some familiarity with programming already, but there's some like Brackeys is the one that immediately comes to mind that teaches C#. And it just kind of depends on what you want to learn. If you want to be a narrative designer like me and just only do narrative design, start practicing screenwriting. Like take some screenwriting courses. Or there's also this book that I read like way back as an undergrad, The Art of the Screenplay by Sid Field, which is basically like the Holy Bible, but for screenwriting. It doesn't necessarily come into direct play with narrative design, just because a film script is very different from like actual dialogue scripting in a video game. But that said, it does teach you about different act structures, like 3 acts, 2 acts, 5 acts, rising action, the developing character, introducing your plot within like the first 10 minutes of the film or the game, which is kind of vital. If you don't have your audience hooked within the first few minutes, they're not going to keep watching the film. They're going to put down the controller. So learning those tricks is important as well. And Yeah, so it does kind of depend on like what it is you're trying to learn, but the resources are out there. And there are actually resources out there that are free. The important thing you have to keep in mind is time. It is going to take you time to get better at this. I am 5 months into my program and I am still the worst programmer. But fortunately, I don't need to be the best programmer. I just need to know enough about programming to explain my story and my narrative design to someone who can program. And it's through the process of like practicing those things on my own and in class that I get better at it and get a better idea of, okay, what is the stuff that I enjoy, that I am good at, and focus on that. And then more importantly, knowing how do I connect that to the other parts of the process? Like, what do I need to know to make their job easier? Because studios love that. They love it when you know something that makes inter-team communication easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I loved like everything you said about the whole journey you've had in game development and how you're still going through it, and I really appreciate that. I know you're gonna do just fine, and you're gonna do great.
I hope so. I hope I do right by my team.
I'm gonna ask if anyone in chat has any questions. I'm gonna go to Spanish now. ¿Alguien en el chat tiene preguntas que les gustaría hacer a Tyler? Ya sea de desarrollo de juegos, de su experiencia o de lo que hayamos platicado a lo largo del stream. Son más que bienvenidas. Si no, pues nos pasamos con el raid y vamos a darle unos 2 minutitos. There's a couple of people in chat saying thank you so much, Tyler. We really appreciate it.
Muchas gracias.
Awesome. Hey, and honestly, if you really want to go do the calls and everything, we're down, man.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, I'm totally down. We just need to like schedule it and we can practice your Spanish.
Yeah, because like I see that so often when I'm on Twitter and there's people complaining about like how badly a particular language has been represented in a game. Like they hear someone speaking Spanish, like I wouldn't say that. What? And like the most recent example I saw was like I think it was for Hitman 3. Like they had like Arabic language written out in the lobby of this one hotel, and there was a bunch of Arabic speakers who was just like, that is backwards. That is not even ordered correctly, and just like ripping into it. So yeah, learning another language can definitely help, especially if you're trying to mock up something for an exotic location in your game.
Yeah, exactly. There's someone in chat that's asking where can we find your work or any games you've made. Where can we follow?
Okay.
Tyler Boyce.
Well, I don't have like too many projects posted on my itch.io page yet. Hopefully I'll have some more that are ready to showcase. But so my itch.io page it should be just T-Boyce. I should probably double check that real quick just to make sure I don't send them to the wrong, because it may just be no, it is T-Boyce. Okay, yeah. Okay. Sometimes T-Boyce is already taken, but I managed to get that first. And then if you want to take a look at my my portfolio, I have my own website, tylerlboyce.com. So it's just first name, middle initial, last name, tylerlboyce.com. And I'm also on Twitter, just at Boyce Games. I've been trying to use Twitter a little bit less, just because I've gotten kind of like a deluge of class assignments to get through. But you can normally see me on there just retweeting stuff about video games, tabletop games, occasionally making a Star Wars reference. I don't know. It's a bit eclectic. I try to keep it relatively video game centered.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, that should be pretty much it.
All right, thank you so much.
Oh, and I'm also on LinkedIn, so like feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Going really quickly back to that previous question about like how to get started in the video games industry. LinkedIn is a very underutilized source for the video game industry. Like, I have made a surprising number of contacts, like, for a bunch of AAA studios just by reaching out on LinkedIn and being like, hey, can we connect? And I can ask you a couple of questions about what it's like to work at your studio. And I got like about 10 responses within like the first hour from like lead developers. So definitely check out LinkedIn, not just mine, but other people's as well.
That's something I've never heard before, and I'm gonna totally do that.
Yeah. Just like anywhere you can find someone on the internet, just try connecting there. So
yeah, thank you so much. Alex, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add.
Nothing else, but thank you, Tyler, to being here and for accepting this invitation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Again, I really love hanging out with new folks and talking about my my experiences in game dev, as relatively small as it's been thus far. But like we said, I'm getting better every day. I'm learning new stuff, and yeah, who knows? Eventually, one of those AAA games, somewhere in the credits, you'll see Tyler Boyce whiz by.
Yeah, we're really hoping that. There's one last comment in chat that says, "Thank you so much. I will follow you. Keep going with the spark that you have, and we know that you're gonna get really far. Sorry for not writing in English. I'm scared of making a mistake. It's completely fine, but thank you."
Please, I have the exact same fear about writing in Spanish, so don't even apologize. It's we're comfortable in the language we grew up with. I totally get it.
Yeah, but thank you again. If there's nothing else to say, we're gonna do at the end of the streams, we rate someone else. I don't know if you have anyone that you'd like to rate, or if anyone in chat.
That is a good question. I don't know if anyone I know is streaming right now. I can check real quick.
I'm gonna switch.
I don't know if you know Trisha Hirschberger.
Nope. Let me find her. Trisha. How do you spell it? Oh yeah, there you go. Trisha Hirschberger. Okay.
Yeah, so I've met her a couple of times in LA, just as an acquaintance. She is a streamer, and she does a lot of stuff with tech, like covering the Consumer Electronics Show, reviewing new tech items. She did one for the RTX 3090, I think is the most recent one she did. But she also streams, and apparently right now she's streaming Little Nightmares 2 on PC.
Awesome.
Because PC.
Yeah. PC Master Race, yeah.
I mean, well, if only by default, because out of curiosity, if anyone out there happens to know how to get a PlayStation 5, I would love to know, because they have not gotten one for our department yet. I want to stress this enough. They expect us to be able to program on a PlayStation 5 and an Xbox Series X, and we haven't gotten either. So we have to just be able to kind of anticipate that in the future.
All right. If anyone in chat knows how to get a PlayStation 5, we'd really appreciate it.
Please reach out to me on Twitter and LinkedIn.
Muchas gracias, Karen Penguin, for ese follow. Thank you so much, Karen Penguin, for that follow. And all right. Thank you again, Tyler. We're gonna go now with the Wraith. I'm Luis Quid. This is Señor Extremo, and this was Tyler Boyce with us today in our third episode of the second season of HP Health Potion, the podcast for mental health. All right, thank you guys so much. Let's go with the Wraith, and we'll see you next week. Muchas gracias a todas las personas que estuvieron aquí en el chat. Muchas gracias a todas las personas que estuvieron sintonizándonos este ratito, o ya sea todo el rato o a ratitos. Nos veremos la siguiente semana con otro episodio. Nosotros fuimos Luis Quid, Señor Extremo y Tyler Boyce. Hasta la próxima. Vamos a darle...
Adiós, chat.
Hasta luego.